It's my great pleasure to introduce Steve Jaggi, a producer, Australian, does a lot of Australian productions, heritage from Canada, which I'll ask about, but some great movies, hopefully you might have seen. Got a lot of things to ask you, Steve. I think I've seen pretty much everything you've made in the last 6 or 7 years at least, so pleased to meet you.
Very nice to meet you, and thanks for having me.
I'll start off with a documentary, Beyond the Reef. Did that just come out of the blue? Pardon the pun, but was it something you wanted to do? Yeah, tell me a little bit about why the documentary came about.
We're super excited about it. So the title was we had been trying to do another youth oriented project up on the reef that dealt with, which was aimed at kind of educating young people about the majesty of the reef and whatnot. And well, we couldn't crack it. And then Luke Wheatley, who's a fantastic filmmaker based up here in Brisbane, and his business partner, Becky, they came and pitched us a documentary, more of a travel documentary. But we had a look at Luke's work and the other stuff that him and Becky done together, and it was really fantastic stuff. So we didn't necessarily think a travel documentary would work, but we kind of went away and thought about it. And then I talked about it with my team, and we kind of got back in touch with Luke and Becky and said, hey, what if you take what you're pitching us and merge it with this idea that we have here and try and find something that kind of meets, sits in between. And to their credit, they were like, yeah, that's a really interesting idea. And we explored it. And then we thought, well, this also, I think for both Luke, Becky, and myself and my team, we all really want to try and do something that was more spectacle based and more premium based. And so we also thought, okay, let's also try doing that as a giant screen offering as well.
Yeah, well, I think it's magical. I mean, you not only did the water, you did Daintree, so you're on land as well. Science meets the environment, and you've kept it educational but entertaining as well. And I think a lot of that has to do with your host. How did you choose your host? She's lovely.
It's interesting. We had like a worldwide search, so we knew that the title would be youth focused. So obviously, it's a feature documentary about the Great Barrier Reef and the Daintree, so Beyond the Reef, hence the title. And but we weren't trying to compete with David Attenborough, BBC, ABC, and Nat Geo do these fantastic IMAX movies, which they spend tens of millions of dollars on, and we're not trying to compete with those. Those are excellent products, but they're all aimed at an older audience. And what we kind of figured was nobody was really going and making content for a younger audience for those premium screen space, and we really wanted to do something theatrical. So we knew that we wanted to have a host, because also giant screen films don't traditionally, I think never do they have hosts.
They have a narrator, normally just a narrator.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, we do a lot of YA content as a company, and so that's an area we have a bit of an understanding about. And I think the narration doesn't really work for that audience. So we knew we needed to find a host that was energetic and young and recognizable for that group. And so we were looking across the globe, and we had a casting director in America and a casting director in the UK, and we spent months and months and months. And then Luke, the director, to his credit, one of his good friends, I think it was, don't quote me, this might be wrong, but from memory, one of his friends had just worked with Shu and was like, you've got to check her out. She's amazing. And of course, me now being almost an old fart, not quite, but getting very close to it, unfortunately, I'm not on my TikTok every night. But for those for your audience members that are young enough to be on TikTok 10 hours a day, they will know you because she's such a huge presence on TikTok, and also has a huge following on YouTube. So Luke was introduced to her and said, hey, what about Shuang? And so we had a look at her stuff, and then we met up with her, and ironically, she's originally from Townsville. So
she's a far north Queensland girl. I did not know that.
Queenslander, but LA based, and kind of in the American scene there. And actually, while I think right after we filmed this picture, she was off doing a film for Amazon Prime that she stars in. So, she's doing a lot of big American stuff, but we were able to capture her for a short window and bring her back to Australia. And her enthusiasm is just, infectious. Amazing.
Well, exactly. I fell in love with her almost immediately because she has that instant style about her, and she was keeping it so much fun. And I think that has a lot to do with the product. She was there, like she was really getting there diving, and the cameras went with her the whole way. And I think the way you did the documentary was a little different. So well done.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And I think, you know, we've done a lot of content up on the reef. Obviously, our Netflix series Dive Club, a number of movies now. And one of the things I think is a hallmark of our brand is that we you know, everything we do is in situ. We don't really do much on sound stages. So it was really important for us with this film, and for Luke, the director, as well, that that we take the audience on this ride, and we go to a shoe, and we, you know, she learns to dive for the show. She goes in a hot air balloon. She goes in a helicopter. She, you know, everywhere that camera goes, she goes.
Yeah.
I think as well that helps, again, especially for a younger audience. That's the point of this film, is it's not, there are educational aspects to it, but it's not there as an education piece to preach. I think young audiences, they know about the environmental degradation. They know it's not there to tell them that we're horrible human beings. It's quite the opposite. It's there to inspire them to get out and explore Mother Nature. And you have to, you know, what's great with this film and great with Shu and how she does it and how Luke directed it is I feel it's very immersive, and it takes you on that thrill ride. It takes you underwater, takes you whitewater rafting, takes you in the air.
And indigenous to side of things, which I really liked. The crab fishing in particular was terrific.
Yeah. Thank you.
It was documentary, something that now that you've had a taste for it, you might go on and do some more. Is that on the cards?
Yeah. Look, so ironically, we actually do a reasonable amount of documentaries, but I think we're just so well known now, first for our YA programming, and now for the romance movies that we make that have, knock wood, you know, they've just been so incredibly popular. We still can't believe how well those films have been doing for us. And so we get more and more demand to make more of them. But it's not at all we do as a company. And we've done a number of documentaries. We were very fortunate to participate in The Art of Incarceration at the beginning of the year, which was out on Netflix, which is a very, you know, important piece on you know, First Nations people who are incarcerated, and how they use art to express themselves and survive, you know, their time in prison. And we've also done And the Beat Goes On as an example, a film we shot in Ibiza about house music. Yes. And we have done some factual content, and we certainly will do more of it. I think now that we've done the hard yards on Beyond the Reef and learnt about premium large format, and Beyond the Reef, by the way, is the first ever Australian premium large format film.
Is that right?
Okay. And to be released in Australian cinemas. Yeah, I mean, obviously Avatar and the new Top Gun, Americans have been doing it for a few years now, but Beyond the Reef, you know, you want to see like a VMAX cinema or one of those giant screen cinemas, because it is an 8K DCP, it is 8K Dolby Vision, it is Dolby Atmos. It, you know, was captured on those big kind of IMAX style cameras. But we certainly have an appetite for more. Absolutely.
The drone is your friend, obviously. The drone gets used a lot these days, and it worked to good effect in Beyond the Reef.
Well, yeah, I mean, a drone might be slightly misleading for your listeners, because they are remotely piloted, but they're massive. So it is this kind of remote aircraft that will be very detrimental to your health if it hits you. It's not a little kind of one you buy at a shop. We do a lot of aerial photography, and again, that's a skill set that we've been developing over the last couple of movies and our series. And myself, I'm a real aviation nerd, and so are some of my team. So a bunch of us have gone out, and especially over COVID, got further qualifications in flying and CASA qualifications and whatnot. So as a company, aviation work and underwater work are really dear to our hearts. So, but Beyond the Reef features a lot of aviation photography, aerial photography, and a lot of helicopter scenes and hot air balloon scenes. So you're up in the air quite a bit.
Yeah, I have a fear of heights, but it still was so great to watch someone else up in the hot air balloon.
Yes. Look, to be honest, I didn't go up. I prefer being underwater. I'm a big aviation nerd, but the hot air balloon does scare me, which is odd because it probably is the safest form of being in the air. But
I mean, I've been told you're a bit of a history buff. So with the documentary, I noticed there was like, you got into the minds of the characters, you know, like they got time to explain themselves and their jobs and where they are, which I thought was really good too, the history of the place.
Yeah, I think, you know what, again, a lot of credit to director Luke, and also shout out to the screenwriter of the film, Georgia Harrison, who actually was nominated for a Writers Guild Award for Beyond the Reef.
Fantastic.
I think with giant screen, it's so different to maybe a more traditional documentary where you kind of have a treatment and you go and you film and you film and you film and you edit and you see where the story goes. You can't do that with giant screen because it's so expensive to make. So this is not a 3 or 4 person crew. There's a whole circus that goes with shooting this sort of content. I think we had a 20, 25 person crew, maybe even slightly more. It's a circus, which is not much for a film, but for a documentary, that's a big crew.
It ran just over an hour. Did you have a lot more footage that you didn't include, or was you're going to put some more? Is there a DVD coming maybe, or a Blu-ray?
Well, what I can tell you is there's 6 versions of the film. So first of all, Ju is bilingual, English and Mandarin fluently. So every time she's talking to camera, we filmed that in English and Mandarin. So there's an English and Mandarin version, like native Mandarin version of the film, at a 70-minute cut. Then there's a 45-minute cut of both language versions for international giant screen, because it's a bit weird how it gets released and whatnot. But here in Australia, it's being released through commercial exhibitors on giant screens, like I said, Event and their VMAX and some of the other cinema chains as a 70-minute, because it has to be that length to qualify to be in cinemas, blah, blah, blah. But internationally in the US and Canada and a few other territories, it'll go out as a 45-minute cut with some different footage. And that's because to be on those giant screens in those territories, it has to be under an hour to qualify as a giant screen movie. And then there's also a 20-minute cut that has, again, different footage, and that's for museums and aquariums. So I think what's great with this picture is, especially for that younger audience, they can actually enjoy it in, over the lifespan of the movie. And hopefully this picture will have, and that's what we're experimenting with. And I think as the business is changing so rapidly, what we're experimenting with is creating a longer tail. So that, the film itself is not just a one-off and it's done. It's actually, it can be experienced multiple times in different ways, and obviously different languages. But even if you just stick with the one language path, you could see it in cinemas here. You could then later on in a couple of years see it in a museum or on a giant screen in a different territory, and it will be a substantially different experience, even though it was all the same movie. It's almost like a continuation of the same movie rather than one movie just being cut over and over again.
Yeah. Did you get any assistance from the Australian, Tourist Commission, or were they aware of what you were doing, or was it totally independent from them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it would be remiss of me to speak too much about it. We have a whole team. Kylie Pascoe on my team, In 3 Productions, which is Luke and Becky's company, also have their own administrative and outreach team as well. And I know that there were communications with Tourism North Queensland and the Queensland government. And so absolutely, there was a collaboration of some form. I couldn't go into the full detail of what it is, I'm afraid. But we have a very close relationship, as I'm sure you can imagine, with Queensland tourism bodies. Yeah.
You have onto your theatrical films, your fiction films. Tell me about your casting process. You have a knack for casting leads that have chemistry, that are adorable, and just they're winning. There's something about them. They're not always well-known actors, but you have a knack of casting some really good leads. Mercy Cornwall, of course, most recently in Mistletoe Ranch. So tell me,
I can't take the credit for that. I mean, I think we are very fortunate to have really great partners. Ben Parkinson does the majority of our casting.
Right.
We have a really great team in the office. Kelly Son Heng, who produces a lot of these films with me. We've also worked with some other great producers, Spencer McLaren, again, Kylie Pascoe. It's also the filmmakers like Rhiannon Bannenberg, Christine Luby, Haley McFarland, Adrian Powers. So it's a collaborative effort. But what I will say is, and I think if you look at our company versus maybe some of the other companies locally and how we do work a little bit differently in that we're very market driven. So we very rarely interact with Screen Australia, and I'm not besmirching them, and they're there for cultural films, and there needs to be a pot of money for cultural films. But what we're doing as a company, and it's a skill set that I probably learned in Canada and the US before I moved here, is we're going to market first. And so I'm overseas multiple times a year. Sophie Tilson, who runs development, was working in LA for a decade before moving back to Australia. Myself, Sophie, Kelly, like we're always overseas trying to figure out what not only what studios want, what they're looking for, but meeting with actors who are up and coming. And funnily enough, a lot of the Australian actors that we've worked with, and like you say, we're able to get them just as they're breaking. We often meet them in LA not in Australia.
Right, yeah, because they're over there auditioning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well done. I've got to say, you also have a knack of creating movies in Australia, but with American accents and in other locations. But Queensland can be anywhere, right? Queensland can be anywhere in the world. It seems to be.
Yeah, I
Even
think.
our snowy Christmas.
Yeah, Mistletoe Ranch, that was a great experience for us, recreating Colorado in Queensland in February.
Well done.
Machines going off, and it was crazy. But look, we certainly do a mixture. We've done quite a bit of content that is all Australian accents. Obviously, Dive Club, our series, but a number of movies we've done, and we've also done movies that have been a bit left of field, and we've done some LGBTQI content. We did Stephen Sewell's first film, Embedded, which was an erotic thriller.
Yeah.
So it is a combination. It is unfortunate, but indicative of our industry that the films that are in American accents tend to, not always, but tend to perform a little healthier fiscally. And I think for us, we, because we're not in that Screen Australia system, we do have to make sure that we're seeing a return. But the good news is, because we do a lot of commercial product, it does allow us to play around.
Yeah.
Maybe more often than some other companies, and we can take big risks like we did on Beyond the Reef, or like we have done on some of our other kind of more out there titles, where we're taking those really big risks because we have this catalog of American accent content that pays the bills.
I like the way that you spread your movies out across different streaming services too. Do you pitch to streaming services, or do they come to you?
Now it's a mixture. They do come to us. But I will definitely say that when we started, nobody talked to us, and it took a long time to build a reputation, and a lesson, a lot of lessons learned on how to deal with streaming services. And you'll notice, if you look at our catalog, that we're really in bed with a couple of them, and there's a couple of other ones who won't even, there's one or two, one local one in particular, who I won't name, that literally won't even take our phone calls. So it's a very competitive landscape. They all compete with each other, and you kind of, as a production company, you don't want to just be doing business with one company, because what if something goes wrong, right? Look at Blockbuster. But at the same token, you have to kind of really build that relationship, and so you try to build a relationship, which is what we're doing with 2 or 3. I think we have an output deal in the US for more of the TV movie type content we do. We've got TV output deal, and then we have a couple of streaming services that we do movies with, and that keeps us busy. But it's a delicate balancing act. Very delicate.
It would be. What's the biggest? What movie broke you through? Was it Riptide? What movie was the one that was?
Before we did Riptide, before we did Riptide, and we did some films that went to some pretty major festivals, but you don't make any money up, with shock horror, even a film that goes to a major festival like Venice or Berlin, the producer still doesn't end off any better off.
I'm surprised. Even if you go to like a trade show or a film festival, you don't get people wanting to buy it there. Like, is it no? I'm surprised.
No, it's down to how films are financed, and the cornucopia of factors. But we were actually going to exit the business after we did a number of films, and again won a number of accolades and whatnot. But I was gonna shut the whole company down and move into something else. And then Riptide was a happy accident. It's something I really believed in, and I really believed in the director. And I met her a few years before on her debut film, which I thought was a masterpiece of YA film, and it ended up performing really well because we self-released it on digital, and it ended up making some money. But at the time, nobody really believed in it. And then Riptide was the film that taught me to just go with my gut. And I think particularly in Australia, but it's the same in Canada where I'm from. Anybody who's making films not in the US, but in a territory that has a government subsidy, we tend to, as a Canadian, it's the same experience as is for Australian filmmakers. We all tend to just blindly follow, what the federal agencies tell us to do. And again, there's a purpose for them there. And I don't want to just have a whole, talk about besmirching them, but what happens is they become like the guardian of culture, and what I learned and what Riptide taught me is, go to agency last, not first. Go with your gut first. Do your market research. Do what you know is right, and then if you're successful, people come to you, and that's what's happened to us. And it was pretty. pretty quick after Riptide. Like it started, building. It was like a bell curve.
There seemed to be a Steve Jaggi production after Riptide about 3 year, I would say. They came through pretty quick. Debbie Ryan was great in that. Will she work with you, like come back and work again, do you think? Or was that just a happy accident, like you said, and a one-off?
I mean, we're in a great, as far as I'm aware, every actor, certainly every principal that we've had, we maintain good relations with. And again, if you look at our catalog, you will see in some of our later movies now that we're starting to work with some actors for a second or third time. So absolutely. I mean, Debbie, a lot of these kind of Disney, with the YA movies we do, we often, again, this comes back to like going to LA and knowing what's happening in the industry. We'd often go over and look for somebody who just finished a big show on Disney Channel, or, just finished something, and they're about to pop, but they're looking for something different. And then it's about, especially if you're going for a Hollywood actor out of LA or Vancouver, you've got to offer them, because you can't compete with money, but what you can do is you can offer them an experience. And that's what we've been offering these actors when we invite them to come over to Australia. Is you kind of put them together with a really exciting director, and you put them in maybe a role that they haven't done before, and you show them some photos and video of where they're going to be staying and how amazing and tropical it is, and that's the sales pitch.
Yeah, well, I've interviewed several of your leads, and they all speak really highly of you. They speak highly of the set, the chemistry between everyone. So you must run a really good business, and it's obviously on the way up, and that's great.
Fingers crossed. It's very, very kind of you. It's really not me though. It's the team, and we're just very lucky to have great people. And I think what enables us to attract great people is the culture, and that culture comes from the content that we make. And again, we are content agnostic to a degree, but the one thing that I will say about our films, no matter what the genre is we always try to make something that will inspire our audience. And we always like to remind our audience that there is good in the world, and it sounds a bit macabre, but one of the things we always say is at the end of the film, have we reminded the audience that life is worth living? And I know that sounds horrible, but you would be surprised. Like so many films, especially indie films, they're so depressing, and there is an audience for that. But that's ultimately, a director. We really wanted to make content that inspires people, and I think what that also does is that attracts a certain type of creative to come and work with us.
We've got it figured out. You either the story revolves around animals, Christmas, romance, the ocean. There's all those elements. Dive Club. Is there a season 2 coming?
I don't know is the answer. Probably not the answer anyone wants to hear, because it was a hugely successful series. I mean, you saw, and I contractually not allowed to say I do in some events, but I won't say it on something that's being recorded. But the numbers on Netflix that watched that show were freaking insane. A huge set, massive figures, anyways, without revealing them. But the challenge is, and this was a big learning curve for us, is that without going into the complexities of deal structure, it was obviously we were the production company. It wasn't a service deal, and it was licensed by Netflix in the world, but licensed by Channel 10 here. And then when we started making it, Channel 10 was bought by Viacom, who owned Nickelodeon, that then bought by Paramount Plus.
That's right.
So it's the rights are so convoluted between all these different entities, and they're all competing with each other, that I think it is making it very difficult to proceed with more of the Dive Club universe, which is never say never, and nobody ever, it's never been canceled. Nobody ever says, no, we're not doing it, but it's always, the onus is on us to try and figure out the contractual mechanisms. And we just, try as we might. We brought on a mentor, and we tried to figure it out. We just, we can't get the competing streaming services to play ball with each other.
You ever thought of maybe an on-demand Steve Jaggi company of your own streaming service?
Yeah. Sorry, I apologize. I put my phone on airline mode, and I don't understand why it's still ringing. It's very rude of me.
That's all right. I was wondering, would you ever have a Steve Jaggi on-demand service of your own for streaming your films?
I don't know if it warrants that. I know our friends over at Wild Bear have just done that, I think, with their factual library. So we'll watch and see how they go. But they have a huge library of, billion hours of content. I don't know what the future is for us. I don't know. Certainly on our kind of wish list things to do. Setting up our own streaming service is not one of them. I think for us, what we're looking to do is we are consolidating. We've over the last couple of years, we've been very fortunate. And I mean, this year we made 6 movies. It's insane. And, we're also in the financing game now. We also own a post-production facility. We have another, we've branched out into owning vehicles. I don't even know how many vehicles we own, just because it's been so busy in Australia. If you don't, and this is, I think, the direction the industry is going in, you can't really be a lone wolf anymore. So to survive in this business, you have to have a certain amount of volume. And then to sustain that volume, you have to have infrastructure. So now I just one day woke up in the morning and realized, apart from the fact that I was losing hair and slowly getting gray hair.
Doesn't look that bad. Come on.
Well, it's very kind of you, but I woke up and just realized that bleeding heck, I've got like this infrastructure. We are like a studio now in terms of the amount of employees we have and everything else. And so it's who knows where the future will go. But I do know that the industry is changing every day, and we're so fortunate that there is demand for our content. But I also know that it's a very fickle industry, and our kind of remit over the next little while is to consolidate and not to stretch ourselves too thin, because we've had a really good time, and I hope this good time continues with the streaming wars and the demand for content. But at some point, there will be no more like this. They won't just continue. The streaming services just can't continue to burn money.
Something will happen.
Something will happen. They'll rein it back in. And what I do see happening in Australia, which alarms me a lot, and we've been able to avoid this thus far, fingers crossed. But I'm seeing a lot of production companies of scale in Australia really turning into service producers, which is all they're doing is producing content for other companies. And I think that is the big thing that we're scared of. So I think to answer your question, for us, it's about consolidation, and it's about being in a position that we can control our own destiny. And I think we'll leave the streaming services to other people.
You touched on it before. You have Canadian heritage. When did you arrive in Australia, and were you always destined to become a producer, or was there other avenues you did first?
Yeah, so I came here in my late teens and actually went to university here, and then I moved overseas and actually lived in the UK, and then moved back to Australia maybe about 10 years ago.
Okay.
So, and when I was a kid, I also lived all over the world with my parents in their work and stuff. So Switzerland, UK, Norway.
Well traveled, and you made it back to Australia. That's good.
The weather. Yeah.
And what was it always going to be the film industry that you were going to go into? What was the other things?
I had no connections to the film industry. It was anthropology is what I was studying at university originally. Yeah. And then I was, as one does, doing a working holiday in London, working in a pub, and I met a film producer who, taught me quite a lot. He was, a bit long in the tooth and a bit bitter, but he produced, a large catalog of, amazing films, and I learned a lot from him, and that kind of piqued my interest, because I think it's a real hard industry to get into, as you know, and as your kind of viewers will know. And what's interesting is, what I've learned is that it's often the people that get into the business by accident who
that's very true
succeed long term. I don't know why that is, but I guess maybe it's because you have to be hard nosed, and you have to make some tough decisions. And it's easier to do that if it hasn't been your lifelong dream,
Yeah. So is that you? Are you hard-nosed? Are you an anomaly? Are you easy? Are you approachable? Or when you've got...
I think I'm very approachable. I don't know. Other people might disagree. I'm not as hard-nosed as I used to be. I'm being soft. And I know that, my team will often complain. Like, now I'm wheeled into meetings to kind of, as a kind of namesake, and then I'm wheeled out for negotiations because I'm getting too soft. You definitely have to be, there's an element of cutthroatness in this business. Yes. And I think what is just super hard, and the hardest thing in this business, is you spend a lot of time and energy curating, your creative babies. And then especially now with how everything works with algorithms and how streaming services decide what to make.
Sure. Yeah.
You have to be ruthless with culling your slate. And you have to have a very, very ruthless approach to content and to what you develop. And you have to be able to turn on a dime And that was definitely something that we were able to do very early on as a business. And that's something I learned overseas before I moved here that I think put us ahead of our competitors. And once we figured out with Riptide, once we figured out what works, we were able to find success very quickly because we were able to turn on a dime. Now I think, especially after Dive Club, which I was fortunate enough to be allowed to show run, and I'm getting more and more creatively involved with some of our projects. As I become more and more creatively involved, I am finding it harder and harder to be so ruthless. So, probably a time will come when I actually divorce myself from the kind of business decisions as to what content gets made in the company.
So you're a big softie, Steve. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah.
What's been the biggest challenge? I mean, a producer funds productions and projects. Which movie of yours was the hardest to get going when it comes to funding and taking off and people interested?
I mean, look, in the kind of era of success, I'm not going to talk about anything pre-Riptide. That's a different world. That's a world of festivals and agencies. In the post-Riptide era, which is an era of like unabashed commercialism for the most part, I would say to you Dive Club, which is our series, which is probably the piece of content I'm most proud of. But that was very hard. I was having heart palpitations and losing hair, and that almost killed me making that. It was very difficult to get off the ground. And we had fantastic, great directors, great writers. All my friends that were involved with it. Was amazing, an amazing experience to make, and great cast. And I'm the most proud of that out of anything I've made. But like I say, getting it made almost killed me. And it was a big learning curve, for a company to move from being an indie film company to then do a series. And it wasn't a huge budget series, but it also wasn't small. For an Australian series, it
wasn't small, and there was a big ensemble as well.
Yeah, and it was all shot on location, Port Douglas and the Reef and stuff. So it was a big show, and we had no experience in television, so it was really hard to convince people. We had to put a lot of our own money into it. We kind of part shot the pilot episode. I risked the entire company, and we put all of my own money in, sold my house, put all of my money into
incredible
development. We had no development support on that one because nobody believed in us. And I think that's what you have to do. If you really believe in something, you have to be willing to risk it all.
Yeah.
The problem is, after you've had a few successes, it's harder and harder to risk it all, because then you wake up like I do, and you've got infrastructure and you've got staff, and they rely on getting paid to pay their mortgages and their alimony and whatever else they have to pay. And all of a sudden you can't, you're risk adverse. But Dive Club came along at a point where we weren't yet risk averse, and we bet everything on it. And kudos to my team, because they all knew that if Dive Club didn't get made, they'd be out of a job. But it was hard. It took about 6-7 months to finance, and a lot of flying around the world. That's
a lot of time to finance a show, from scratch.
Well, yeah, I mean, some people spend years, but with our teen movies, the romance movies, we would normally finance those in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But or a lot of stuff now we finance ourselves. We have our own kind of fund. But doing Dive Club was the hardest thing I think we ever had to do as a company.
Now I hear you're a massive Harry Potter fan. What's your favorite Harry Potter book?
I don't know if I am a massive Harry Potter fan. I think somebody's playing with you.
They are. I was told you have never read a Harry Potter book. So
here's the thing. I don't mind Harry Potter. And I finally succumbed to COVID a few months ago. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to use this opportunity to watch Harry Potter, because I know everybody loves it. And instead of Dive Club, they were all, I'm at the age where I was like, Lord of the Rings was my thing when I was a teenager.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I'm a generation, the Harry Potter films are fine. I don't have anything against them, but I never watched them all. I certainly have never read a book. So I got COVID, and I was like, yeah, this is my opportunity to watch all the Harry Potter movies. And first day I'm bedridden. I watched 2.5 of them, fall asleep. And the next morning I felt fine. I went back to work from home, obviously. But so I've never gotten past the third movie, and I have not read any of the books. But I did go to Harry Potter World at Universal, and I've been to the one in UK as well. So I do have the robes for the whatever one he's in, Harry Potter's in, and the Hufflepuff, Gryffindor and Hufflepuff. So that's my Halloween costumes.
Look, yeah, I was told by Mercy, I'll say, yes. Mercy said, ask him about Harry Potter.
It's an ongoing joke on all these, especially the YA movies, because again, all the actors of that kind of
course, that generation,
they love Harry Potter. So it's just an ongoing joke that I'll rib them about Harry Potter, because there'll always be that one actor or one director in particular that we work with a lot, who is the world's biggest Harry Potter fan. And they just get, as a Star Wars fan, I get it when somebody comes up to you and they start talking about a character and you're like, no, that's Star Trek, not Star Wars. That's what I'll do with Harry Potter.
Tell me about musicals. Now, you've touched on some of your movies have a little bit of singing in it and musical interludes or sequences. Would you ever consider maybe making or producing a musical?
The short answer is yes. Love musicals. I think we've done a number of films, and also the first 3 episodes of Dive Club with Rhiannon Vandenberg, who's an amazingly talented director.
Yeah.
Her background is music, and she actually studied at university composition.
Okay.
So, and then it's been a big part of my life. My father, when he was young, he was British, and he was in, he wasn't a coal miner, but they used to have all throughout England, especially the north of England, these coal bands. You see them Brassed Off and all these other British movies.
The Brassed Off was a terrific film.
I love that stuff. Yeah, so that was my dad's life, when he was kind of in his teens and stuff, and that's how I met my mother as well. And so music kind of ran the family. And then when I was a kid, played piano and then trumpets and blah, blah, blah. And so that was always a big part of my upbringing. And then working with Rhiannon in particular, but also some of the other filmmakers we worked with who came from strong musical backgrounds. That's something that has played a big role in a lot of our movies.
Yeah.
And I think our audience, for a lot of our films, the audience actually really enjoys that. And I mean, in Mistletoe Ranch, it's this beautiful film, but then the character sits down at the piano and then all of a sudden starts singing, and then the male lead comes in, and it's a romance movie, but they built this song out, and audiences love it.
It was a lovely moment. It was really cool. I'll put that in my review that you weren't expecting it, and it just happens. And you utilized, or Mercy, we're talking about Mercy again, her beautiful voice. So that's why I thought maybe a musical, because there seem to be a lot of musicals around. You could probably produce one with some great talent in Australia.
Yeah, possibly. I would love to do that one day. So I'll put that on the whiteboard.
A couple more questions before we wrap it up. To put you on the spot, who would you like to work with? You haven't worked with yet. Anyone in particular you've got your radar on upcoming?
Well, that will make it difficult for me to negotiate their rates if I tell you who they are. But there's a number of artists that are really exciting, both, locally here in Australia and internationally. I think the big thing for us is what we always try to do is to find somebody who understands the ethos of the content we create, but will elevate it. And so it's really important. And I think that's where a lot of filmmakers in particular, but also writers, do struggle, is you've got to, in this business, I think the secret to success and what we've been able to do very well as a company is deliver the audience something they want, but find a way to have a point of difference and elevate it. And I think that's what we're always continuously looking for in all of our creatives, but especially the directors, especially the writers, is people who are conscious that they are making a piece of art for somebody else, not themselves. Yeah. But that they can then take that as a base and add their unique voice on top of that to elevate that, so that it's a film that a commercial fee-paying audience will want to see and will pay tickets to. But when they go there, like Rhiannon did in Mistletoe Ranch, you go in there thinking it's a Christmas romance, and it is a Christmas romance, but it suddenly turns into this musical extravaganza that you're not expecting. That's the trick to elevating the genre, and we're always looking for filmmakers who do that. And we find those filmmakers, we find those writers either through referrals or in the strangest of places. Sometimes it's a play or something, or a short film or a music video. And the same with actors. We're always, myself or other people on the team are always going to all these, kind of reviews with the young actors as they graduate from all the acting colleges and stuff. And just as well with actors, looking for actors that can speak to the audience. Right. And this is important as well, especially for young actors. We're looking for actors that don't. Sometimes what can happen with actors who are finely trained is that they can actually be a little kind of condescending towards the audience. And I think what we often forget is that when we're making movies commercially, our films, any of our films for any Australian filmmaker, they have to play in Wagga Wagga, they have to play, in Winton, they have to play, they're not just for St. Kilda and Bondi and, New Farm, they're for, the suburbs. And so it's really important to find emerging practitioners, again, whether they be writers, directors, actors, whose voice does bring something fresh, but who understands that their audience is suburban and can speak to that audience.
Yeah, well, from my own point of view, I'm on 16 or 17 different Triple M stations regionally. So Victoria, Queensland, Western Australia, and so forth, South Australia. And they're the ones that they're the independent cinemas often are the ones that are showing your movies.
Yeah, you know,
So it's great. I'm getting the word out. Plus, they're getting theatrical release.
I often get asked to go and lecture or give presentations at film schools, and I can't tell you the number of times I've had a film student say to me, "Oh, but Steve, you're you know, I was wherever, blah blah blah, you know, wherever, central Melbourne in particular is the worst," and they'll be like, "Oh, your films don't even play there." Like, you know, I had some art critic, you know, come to you a few weeks ago. I was like, "Oh, your films are just tax dodges. You know, they don't ever play in cities." And I'm like, "Hey, nobody makes film for a tax dodge, my friend." You know, I'm not sure how that works. Maybe he's watched The Producers a few times.
What a stupid thing to say, honestly.
I know, but I'm like you said, the audience that is in central Melbourne and central Sydney, and even a little bit now, unfortunately, central Brisbane, they're not watching Australian films anyways. You know, your audience is, for us, if you look at the box office results, I'll tell you, every film we make plays really well all up and down the Eastern Seaboard. Sunshine Coast, Townsville, Coffs Harbour, Newcastle, western suburbs of Sydney, Brisbane suburbs, Ipswich, you know, that's where your audience is. That's where our audience is. And it's important not to forget that.
You know your audience, and that's the main thing. That's why you're so successful. And I thank you, Steve. Are you going to direct anytime, you know, or are you happy to stick with the producing?
I have directed, so I directed a documentary, and because I also directed a film called Chocolate Oyster that was surprisingly successful for us. It was a black and white, very art house indie film that was very, what's the word I'm looking for here? Divisive at the Sydney Film Festival. It was an interesting experience for me. You know, it was really one of the festival programmers kind of like lead films at the festival there, locally made, again, black and white, a lot of all mumblecore.
I need to see this movie. I don't know of it. This is great.
I had musical numbers in it. You know, it was very hard R-rated, but great cast, and it you know, got all these rave reviews and early kind of buzz before people knew who I was, because back then nobody really knew who I was. This was about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and it got all this great buzz. It was in the centerpiece of the Sydney Morning Herald. Blah 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 blah. The film premiered, you know, standing ovation, and the Q&A afterwards. And I get up there, you know, with my American accent and blah, blah, blah. And then boom, Knives came out. And, but, you know, it's still like, you know, we still get great reviews in a lot of the press, but then some other press, the Murdoch press in particular, you know, really attacked it. But it did, surprisingly, and this is really interesting for filmmakers. This is a black and white film about young adults in Bondi who are really pretentious, who don't know what they want to do with their lives. Right. Like, there is nothing commercial about this movie whatsoever, with a French-inspired, like Art Nouveau-styled photography and jazz music, right? Nothing artistic, very artistic, nothing commercial about this movie at all. And we played to sold-out cinemas up and down Eastern Seaboard. Again, New South Wales and Queensland. No business in Victoria, but it made us money back. And who knew in a million years that would happen? This
one completely went under my radar, so I'm going to have to seek that one out.
Yeah, well, what we did with it is, because we always try to experiment and do crazy things. That particular film, we vowed we would never release it outside of cinemas.
Okay.
And that is what I said to the cast. We made it because it's a pretty risque movie and there's some pretty risque stuff in it. And we will re-release it. We've actually re-released it twice now in limited theatrical engagements, and we will probably re-release it again next year, probably just in Sydney and Brisbane. But every time we release it, on a very small release, mind you, every time it sells out.
Okay. Good to know. Well, hopefully you'll get a director's chair with your name on it again. Yeah.
We'll see if they let me. I don't know.
There was actually a Bondi movie similar to that called Dust Off the Wings that starred Kate Sobrano, the musician, back in the 90s. And that was released by Paramount or someone. So that was an actually big rated R theatrical release. Yeah, wow. Similar, but it wasn't in black and white. Who knows? It's been a while since I've seen it. Well, Steve, what can you tell me? Is there any little exclusive or anything that you can tell me what's coming up next, or what to look forward to from Steve Jaggi Productions in 2023?
Yeah, well, we are just shooting a film at the moment. So, of course, for those viewers of yours who like romance movies, those keep coming, and they keep getting better and better. We have a really special movie that we're shooting early next year. I cannot talk about it, but it is a bit off genre. It has a romance element, but it's definitely elevated. And it's very ambitious from a very exciting director.
Okay.
And then also we have a genre film that we're doing next year, and we have another series that we'll start shooting next year as well. That will also be a little different. So it won't be a YA like with Dive Club, but it'll be a similar level of sophistication and risk taking stylistically, but it will be more for an older audience.
So you're broadening the age demographic a little bit.
Yeah, if you look at our wheelhouse, what really works well for us is kind of tweens. I don't know why, but 9, 10 through 13. Yeah. And then the romances really play well to kind of 28 to probably 48, that window of women. And that's our key audience base for most of our content. Odd that it would be me making that content. I don't know why. Maybe I actually don't know why. I have no idea why we're going to make that kind of content, but that is the audience that we make content well for.
I just thought of one more quick question, because you're sitting in front of some of your posters. Do you have a say in the designs, in like the final say in the outcome of the artwork?
Yes, I do. There is. Is
that tough? That must be tough to decide.
Look, there is in the office, jokingly, and I know this outside the office as well, there has become what's known as the Steve Jaggi look. And we are actually, because we are perpetually growing, we have recently brought in some advisors to help with a bit of a corporate restructure. And one of the things that we're now, finally, now we're all adults, they're actually, we're having done like a proper, thick style guide on how the, what the color scheme are for our films, this and that, because, or just organically, there's a color scheme and there's a style. But what I can tell you is I am partially colorblind. I'm red-green colorblind. That's important. Yes. And that's important because a lot of male filmmakers are Tony Scott, Michael Bay, blah, 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 blah. And the reason I say this is if you look at how their films are colored, it's similar to how our films are colored. And I never even realized this. I didn't know I was red-green colorblind until, I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, because it's not like I see black and white. I just didn't know. But I really, for me to be emotionally engaged by a picture, I like, unless it is black and white, I like to have super heavy saturation. Yeah. And that's because of how I see colors. And a colorist, one day he was, coloring, because again, all of our films, and sometimes to the dismay of the filmmakers, there is a Steve Jaggi like color palette. It's very saturated, very bright.
I can see that. I guess now I'm thinking about it, I can see that. I can see why people say that.
And I just thought, I was like, that's what looks cool. That's what I like. And it's my company. So that's what we're doing. And then this colorist that we work with a lot, Justin up here, he's like, Steve, he's like, are you colorblind? And I was like, I don't think so. And I did that test with all the, the colors in the wheel, and it turns out I'm red-green colorblind. And then I then was talking to them. He's like, well, you should need to like find out about these other filmmakers. And also what's his name, did Batman Begins and all those films. Christopher Nolan, red-green colorblind. So you have all these male filmmakers that have a form of colorblindness. And that's why a lot of these films, that particularly in the action space, but from these types of filmmakers, have very specific, like that Michael Bay style look, which I think was Tony Scott look before then. Anyways, so long story short, our films, particularly in the romance space, and again, we like to think that we make like the, of the genres we do, class leading versions of those films. Sure. Our romance films are incredibly glossy and saturated, like those other genres, because now I know, because that's what connect with.
Well, thank you very much, Steve. I actually could talk to you more, but I don't want to hold you up any
All good.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.